Okay, so here we are. We're back and moving on. We are into the story portion of it. It's all about mastering your story. Why are stories important? Well, if I have to tell you, then you better really look into it. Stories engage us. From the time we were children, we wanted people to read stories. We imagined all kinds of situations, all kinds of scenarios, being in different parts of the globe, maybe being in the stories or reading a book and traveling the globe. From the wee age all the way up to today, we engage in stories. The other reason why stories are very important is that when we are sharing stories with people, we're also engaging their imagination. As we share a story, the more impactful, the more descriptive, the more engaging they are, the better the journey for them. So for the next few weeks, we're going to be really looking into how to tell a story. Stories can be 10 seconds. Stories can be 10 hours long. So you can write a book. Listen, you don't believe me? Go look at some of the audiobooks. They're like 8-10 hours long, these audiobooks, right? So it's up to you how long your story. And the purpose of the story makes a big difference. Are you using it for marketing? Are you using it for teaching? The same story can be used in many different scenarios, many different ways. And so how do you do that? Well, today is part one of mastering your story. And so what we're going to be looking at is story mining. And I'm guessing you have not heard this particular maybe description before. And story mining is super, super important. Now, what does it mean? Well, story part is simple enough. Mining, what does mining bring to mind? Gold mines, diamond mines. Yes, we're talking about mines where we're getting precious, precious gems. There's nothing more precious than our story. And you want to keep that in mind. And there's nothing more precious than other people's stories. So we want to honor their story. We want to embrace their story. When they're sharing a story, we want to pay attention. Well, sometimes it's easier to pay attention to a story than other times, isn't it? Sometimes the way they tell the story is really engaging. But at the end of it, I'm like, okay, what was the point of that? That was really good, but I'm not getting what I'm supposed to be getting. So there is a way to actually craft a story. We're going to be doing that. The story mining is about you choosing your stories. So how do you choose your stories? Just like we go into a mine, sometimes they get the big nuggets, and sometimes they get tiny little flakes of gold, if you will, right? Or the diamonds, whatever. Sometimes they're big, sometimes they're tiny. So you never know what you're going to get. It's up to you to sort through, to decide which stories are valuable to you. Which ones are you going to be using which way? It's just like some of the precious gems you get, some of the diamonds we get, they're used for construction. They're used for drills. Others are precious gems that go on maybe on our fingers or just in, basically embellishing our bodies because they make us feel good, right? So if we're looking at that, so story mining, if we look at it from that perspective, what does it mean? Well, all of it begins with your unique influencer code. If you haven't guessed already, that's your story mine. That's where you go mining, right? Okay, so here we go. And if you haven't already looked at earlier versions, our going way back to the beginning of the program, you definitely want to do that because we started with the unique influencer code with stories in our work experiences, successes and learning opportunities. There are stories in life experiences, successes and learning opportunities, and also stories of our divine gifts that we're born with, our artistic gifts, physical gifts, cognitive, intuitive gifts. Every one of those has a story. If I asked you about your gifts, you would know exactly what story to share with me. So we're not going to be talking about the unique influencer code, but I want you to know that is your story mine, okay? You're always going to go back to that because that's what makes you stand out. That's what makes you unique. That's where you pull all the expertise and the experience that you have to share with people. That's where you find your credibility. That's where you find the engagement and what fuels you, what fires you up, and all the stories that come with them. Okay, so how do we pull the stories out? Well, we're going to be looking at the StoryMining GPS. Okay, yeah, GPS, it is a guidance system. We start with your gifts in the stories, all your stories within your unique influencer code. Then we look at the purpose of the story. Why do you even want to look at that story? Why is that story important? How would you even use that story? So what is the purpose of that story? And then you want to sort through the stories, okay? So you want to sort through because, you know, throughout your life, you probably have thousands of stories. A lot of them you don't even remember. But once you start story mining, one is going to trigger another. If you start looking through an old photo album, you're going to remember things that, oh my God, I totally forgot about that. And if you start talking with somebody about a particular experience when they were there, they're going to share their, you know, memory of it or their point of view, and you're like, oh my God, I didn't even know that. I didn't know that, or I didn't even know that person was there. I forgot that that happened. This is all going to happen. So basically, it's once you begin, you're going to have thousands and thousands of stories. Now combine that with stories about your products and, you know, the people that you're helping, the customers and the clients that you have, you can be overwhelmed. So as you know, there's a lot to sort through. So how are we going to simplify it? Well, that's what we want to do. First of all, what you want to look at, the ones that are most valuable, the ones that are really important for you to share because they're important for you and they're important for the people you're sharing with, are your perturbation stories, the ones that transformed your life one way or another, pivotal point, because they carry a lot of energy. You're passionate about it. They had a major impact on your life, and the time, the space, the combination of things that happen are totally unique to you, and you bring in your passion, okay? And so the perturbation, I also did a section on this, so I'm just going to quickly go through it. Perturbation is an alteration of the function of a biological system induced by external or internal mechanisms. And what this means is that this is like from a dictionary. What this means is that you are transformed. Whether the internal pressure, something had to change in you, or something from the outside, something came along and said, you will never be the same again. You had to shift. Those stories are very powerful. And if you remember the stories that impact you when you're watching somebody else share their story during their program, their presentation, their interview, those are the stories that get you energetically because of the passion they bring up in the person who's sharing, and that passion is contagious. Okay, so what happens during a perturbation? Well, a perturbation is basically this. It's the pressure that we constantly feel towards changing something. You know, stress, more stress. We keep bouncing against the wall until we break through the wall. And that's the process of the transformation. That's the process when a charcoal turns into a diamond. Okay, transformation happens. So we want to look at your perturbation stories when you have changed and you will never go back to be the same again. And so you really want to look at that. These are your precious gems. Those stories are your gems. That's where your mind is, okay, your precious stories. And they set you apart from everyone else because nobody else can explain what happened because it has happened to you. The transformation, the mindset, the situation, it's unique to you. So nobody else can actually tell that story like you. And their perpetual inspirational energy source for you. Notice the word perpetual, inspirational energy source. This means that it doesn't make a difference whether you tell the story today or 50 years from now, because it was a pivotal moment, your memory will go right back into that time and space. The energy will be there, the passion will be there, everything will be as it was at the time, and that's where the power comes from. Your tuition paid for the University of Life. And that's exactly what we do, the price that we pay for different experiences that we have. So the University of Life is very, very costly, and that's your tuition. So you better honor it for what it is, a price paid, a very high price paid for education. And okay, this is where it comes in to connect your emotional connection with your divine customers. These are the people that you are looking to serve. These are the people that will connect with you in every way because of your brilliance, because of your expertise, because of your heart, and because of your passion. Those are your divine clients. And so I hope you're fired up, because that's what you're going to be needing to sort through all of the stories. They have to qualify. So as you're going through all of your stories, I'm going to share with you a couple of stories of my own. At the age of 9, I was the most playful, happy child. I was actually putting on plays. I was directing plays. At the age of 9, I was directing 12-year-olds. I was making costumes out of crepe paper, okay? Yeah, we're talking about fairy tales. My little Red Riding Hood was running around with crepe paper, red crepe paper cape around her neck, right? And it was an amazing time. My imagination ran wild. I would actually make the costumes. And what's really interesting about this is that years later, I actually went into apparel manufacturing. And I am still directing people. So at the age of 9, I was doing the things that I was passionate about. So what are some of the things you did as a child? What were you thinking? I could still see myself. I would even set it up. I would get those little, yellow flags, and I would hang them around. I would make my own stage and things like that. And, the other thing that actually came up is I was talking with somebody recently, and I said, I can't believe at 9 years old, I was directing 12-year-olds. He said, and when somebody is passionate as you are, you can direct anybody at any age. And, that's what I want to get across to you. Think about it without me getting into like a lot of detail about it. But can you see a 9-year-old sitting there making costumes out of crepe paper, gluing them together, and then having a vision of this is how I want it to be. This is what I want to share with people. I think this person would be great for that part. This person would be great for that part. Come on, everybody, let's do this. And then we would all get our parents together, and they would be cheering us on. And it was just a beautiful experience that I created from my passion. Within our neighborhoods, it would gather all the children, would gather the parents. I would bring the community together at 9 years old. So think about it. What are some of the things you like to do at an early age? Well, let's move along a little bit more. Who you are is who you are, and the passion comes across no matter what we do. So I want to share a little bit more about myself. One of the things that I don't usually share, unless it's like in an in-depth live event, when we're really going into crafting our stories, is my story from when I moved from Armenia to the US at the age of 13. Now, in Armenia, I was a cool kid, straight A student, participating in all the different school projects. I was singing, dancing, all the things we do. Then we moved to the US. I couldn't speak a word of English. We had to leave everything behind because at the time, Armenia was part of the USSR. It was one of the republics of USSR. So we had to leave everything behind. There was family of 5. I was the oldest at 13. My middle sister was 10, and my youngest sister was 2.5. And it was my parents. Nobody spoke any English. Well, life wasn't so good when we moved here. And I actually went from being a cool kid to the kid that was getting bullied because I was wearing clothes that were 2 years old. At the age of 13, you don't wear clothes that are 2 years old. They're way out of style. I was a skinny little thing that they just thought I was dumb because I couldn't speak English. And I remember one time I was getting bullied, and inside I was, if you knew me, you would like me. You know, I wanted to scream out, but I didn't have the words. And that's why I'm very passionate about giving people voice and visibility so they can go out there and be seen for who they are. So this is where my passion comes from, okay, combined with this. So our life experiences might matter. But there is another part that I want to share with you because one thing led to another. And by the time I hit 16, I was suicidal. That's me at the age of 16. Without going into a lot of detail, I decided, well, you know, I'm just going to just go get a job. So my very first job at the age of 16, I was suicidal. My very first job was as a telemarketer. I mean, think about the insanity of that decision. You know, these are people hanging up on you. I'm already feeling horrible about myself. And I'm calling people who are hanging up on me. But you know, the thing that got me through it, the thing that was important to me, why I loved that job, it impacted a different part of me. What I was doing is I was actually selling the Boston Herald American, raising money for Jerry's kids. Now, the thing that got me through it is I actually had a picture of Jerry's kids. I can still picture it. I was sitting in my little booth. There were a bunch of us right next to each other in rows. There were old phones, you know, that old, this is going back 50 years, right? So all those, you know, phones dialing in, and I had a picture of Jerry's kids right on my phone. So every time I would get devastated by somebody yelling at me or hanging up, I'm doing it for Jerry's kids. I'm doing it to help them. Why is this important? At a time when I didn't even want to help myself, I wanted to help others. And if you look at the work I have been doing, my entire system is get ready, go global, get paid, make a difference. Make a difference shows up in everything I do. It's about impact. It's about making a difference in people's lives. So everything we do, yes, we do need to take care of ourselves, but how can we make an impact on other people's lives? Because it's so much bigger than us. So even then, well, I couldn't even think myself through anything. I instinctively knew that I had to make a difference. So it made a difference for me. Now, I want you to go back. I want you to go back at pivotal times in your life when you had a perturbation moment. What was important to you? What called that transformation? What gave you the courage to do what you did? What gave you the courage to walk away or break through or say something or whatever it was? I want you to think about that. Your perturbation stories tell you a lot more about you. I wanted to share stories about myself when I was a kid because these are only like, 9 years old, 16-year-old. Different stories because different times in our lives bring up different aspects of ourselves, but they're all a part of us. They're all part of the whole, this that tapestry of our brilliance, of our experiences, of our heart, of our special gifts that we're born with. And how do they come together? So going back at 9 years old, I wanted to gather people. I wanted to have a community. I wanted to celebrate. And I was making costumes, which again, I went into apparel manufacturing. And I'm still directing people. And some people might say I can be a bit controlling. Yes, my daughter. But you know what? They all know that my heart is always in the right place. So, and the story about my telemarketing, well, that says a lot about me. I'm not even going to go back into it, but what's important to you, you definitely want to do that. And so how are we going to sort through these stories? Why would you even want to go back and look at these stories? And what do you want to share? Well, I'm going to make it easy for you to decide because not every story needs to be shared everywhere. Not every story, has the same purpose. So we're going to be looking at when and how you share, what you share, if you're ready to share. So are you guys getting a little bit more into the importance of story mining to inspire yourself and others? I hope you are, because here we go. I'm going to give you an example how you're going to be looking at your stories to sort through them. So story mining, when you are looking at your stories, right? There is a reason for every story. Our life experiences create our stories. Our stories create our unique influencer messages. So story mining will gather, group, categorize your stories for easy access. So this is about you taking inventory of what you have. So, and you need to have, without going into a lot of detail, you should have different folders for different things. But right now, I'm going to give you examples of how you're going to categorize. You want to have what the story, what happened, and the purpose of the story for you. Okay, why would you want to share that story? What do you want people to know? And what's in it for the audience? Now, the first example, the JCPenney story, I'm not going to go into that. But since I shared with you a 9-year-old and a 16-year-old story, so let's take a look at how I would categorize it. This is not the whole story. This is just basically taking inventory so you know what the stories are. So the 9-year-old, depending on where I'm sharing it, okay, could be to build credibility. If I'm looking to show people, hey, I'm a natural at doing this. I was doing this at 9 years old. This is what I'm meant to do. So it could be great to the credibility and demonstrate my creative abilities, okay? So for me, I want that to get across because I was creative. Even at 9 years old, I was sewing and directing and inviting, bringing a community together. And I'm a natural leader. So that's what I want people to get from my story, okay? And then if we look at into what's in it for the audience, okay? Oh, I misspelled audience. Thank you for that. I just saw the note. Thank you for that. Okay, so what do we want the audience to get from that? Well, the purpose of that is identify your natural gifts. So were you inspired to take a look at what you naturally do? Because that's what I wanted you to get out of that story. And identify your natural disposition. Now, I didn't go into a lot of detail, but this is based on the DISC profile, if you will. What's your natural disposition? Are you a leader? Are you an influencer? So if I took more time to tell the story, I would have walked through that as well. But this is just how can I use that story? And as a telemarketer at 16-year-old, now this is just titling, and I have other stories where it would be, Susan's this or Harry's that, whatever. So you want to always identify if it's your story or somebody else's. And so the 16-year-old, I've been in overwhelming pain. Can you imagine someone who has not been in overwhelming pain who can relate? Okay, making a difference is my why. And that would get across. So now people know if they're going to work with me, there has to be a win. We have to focus on the why, and they have to make a difference. That's where I come from. It's that important to me. And so if people who don't want to make a difference, if making money is the only thing that's important to them, they're not going to stay around me too long. They will take what they have, the strategic aspect of it, the marketing aspect of it, the media aspect of it. They will take it and use it, and they will go. They're not going to be the long-term clients. They'll stay around for a few months or a year or two, whatever, but they will go on their way because at some point, I'm going to have them tap into their heart, and they're not going to feel so good about it. So my job is to give them the information so they know where it is if and when they get ready to tap into their heart. So what is it that I want to get across to the audience? You are stronger than you think. You can make a difference. So these are just to identify, these are just little points to identify what the story is about. Now, as far as the actual creation of the story, writing of the whole story, it would go into another folder, right? The stories that are chosen to be used, they will have a place where they're created. This is, if you think of it as the index, okay? This is just basically inventory of what you have in your mind, your story mind, right? Just inventory. So you know which ones you want to have. Depending on how you organize things, you can look at this as an index in a book. You can look at this as, what's in different folders. You can look at this as whichever way you organize this. This is just to say what's in that compartment, okay? That compartment called the story that you have. Okay. So let's move on. The thing that got me is the layers and layers. I did a search on a diamond mine. Look at this. Look at all the different layers. Look at the way they just keep going deeper and deeper. And just like you can see each one, the earth has different colors. So when we look at this, our stories are the same way. I mean, this is an area of it. This is a huge area. But look at this. The deeper we go, the more we find, right? And so I just wanted to kind of share that because I thought it was very, very similar to how our life stories are. Okay, so let's take a look at why stories matter. The thing about it is that every time we go to look at a story, we actually shift. It happens naturally, okay? So whether you choose to look at a story or not, especially if it's a painful one, it's up to you. You instinctively will know. The thing that I do want to kind of point out, I have found from my own experience and the experts that I have worked with is that if you were not ready or able to actually look at it, you would not be remembering that story. It would not be coming up in your thoughts. So one way or another, you are able to look at it. So that's the first step. So whether you choose to look at it or not is the second decision. The other thing that I want to bring up is that whatever the situation, especially if it's something that happened years ago, you have grown, you have changed. So when you go back and look at the same story, it's not going to be from the perspective of when that happened, that time in your life, where you were emotionally, where you were mentally, where you were physically is going to be much different than where you are right now. Even if it wasn't that long ago, you could have gone through something emotional yesterday or last week. because you were in that emotional space. So when you go back and think about it today, because you're in a different emotional space, even if it's a day, right? Everything changes, the perspective changes. So I invite you to actually just say, hey, I'm willing to look at it. I can choose whether I want to look further or not. And that is important because here's what happens naturally. When we look at a story, we heal. We heal internally. As soon as we go back to look at it, we heal internally. And there are layers and layers and layers always. Every time we go back, we see different aspects of it. So be willing to look at it. And when we share, we help others. So how you see yourself, what you look at, changes. So whether you need to go back to look at it to heal yourself, or maybe after you have healed, you want to go ahead and share so you can help others. Either way, that's the process, depending on where you are. The other thing that I want to make sure is you choose what you share. Remember, your stories are your gifts. They're your precious gems. And you decide where, when, and how you want to share them and to what degree. So just because you have identified the story, just because you have identified and itemized the story, just because you have figured out what you would get, what you want people to know about you by sharing that story, and just because you know what others will receive by you sharing that story, doesn't mean you are sharing the story. It means you're just thinking about it. It just means you're just getting ready. It doesn't mean you're doing it. Okay, so do that. Now, the other thing that I want to point out as well is that there are different ways of sharing stories. You can take the same story and aspects of it you can share for the general public. And then aspects of it you can share maybe within a small group. And then aspects of it you can share only one-on-one as you think it's necessary. Just like, for example, I shared with you about me being suicidal at 16. Well, that's all I shared with you. This is a public video. Now, if we were doing an intimate retreat, I will go more into detail as far as what was going on, what happened, what was going on around me and in me. So that's something I would share in a more intimate group. And there are aspects of it that I will only share when I think is going to help somebody in a one-on-one conversation. Same story, used different ways. It's a tool. It's a very, very powerful tool. So learn how to use your stories. When you learn how to tell the stories, when we go into sharing your why, we're going to sharing your story TEDx style, and then going into sharing your why. How do you do it? Then you're going to be able to give a different, breathe new life into your story, okay? But the foundation is you going back, looking at it, taking inventory of all your stories. And I will tell you, most of the stories that you actually come up with in your mining, you're not going to use them. You're going to be using a few of them, but just the act of doing it, just the act of having those stories itemized, having the ones that you know how you would use them is going to empower you. It's going to give you a lot more stories. It's going to give you a lot more information to tap into your unique influencer code. And you'd be surprised how those stories come up at different times. You're going to know exactly what to do because you know what the purpose of that story is. It's not just a story. It's what you want people to know about you. It's the impact you want to make on others when you're sharing the story. Otherwise, you're just telling a story and you could be wasting time. So be on purpose, be in your passion, be intentional. in how you want your stories to impact your life, to help your business, to help your community, and of course, impact the people that you want to serve. So with that, I'm going to wrap it up. I hope I gave you a lot of food for thought. I hope I got you excited about doing some serious story mining, because man, you have very rich deposits. You have amazing gems that need to be uncovered, polished, and shared with the world, because you are amazing.